All right, so we are going to move into the next talk. I'm going to introduce Jennifer Siteman. She is one of 3 genetic counselors we have at Banner MD Anderson Cancer Center. Jennifer received her master's in genetic counseling at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She's done research and has been published in multiple areas. Jennifer is a board-certified genetic counselor and is an active member of the National Society of Genetic Counselor, and she's currently the current secretary of the Arizona Genetics Alliance. So today she's going to be discussing the genetics of melanoma. It's a great talk, and I look forward to hearing this.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Gimbel. So let me get my screen shared. Oh, this one. Awesome. Yeah. So what I want to talk today about is, if we have melanoma, there's melanoma in the family, I'm sure a lot of times it runs through our heads, is this something genetic? Is this something that is running through my family? If I have a family member with melanoma, am I at risk for melanoma? If I have melanoma, are my kids at risk for melanoma? Could we be at risk for other cancers? So these are all really great questions that genetic counselors try to help answer in this process. So when we look at cancer, and this is just any type of cancer, but melanoma as well, we know that about 10% of cancer is what we call a hereditary type of cancer. So this is where we see some kind of genetic predisposition to that cancer. So this means that there's a change in one of our genes that's causing these cancers to happen more often than we would normally expect. These are changes that we're born with. So they've been there since we were babies. They've been, in every single cell of our body, and they're usually getting passed on through family. So we usually inherit them from like our mom or our dad. They have a chance to get passed on to our siblings, to our kids. So, very much running in the family. So that's why we call it like an inherited or hereditary type of cancer. And individuals in this group will have a significantly higher risk to develop cancer because of that genetic predisposition. We also can see cancer in what we call a familial sense. So familial cancers are where we're seeing this cancer happen multiple times in a family. So maybe we're seeing, multiple people diagnosed with the same types of cancer, but when we do genetic testing, everything comes back completely normal. So there are no genes that are causing these cancers. So we can't actually call it hereditary because there's no actual genes that are causing it, but it's still something that's happening enough in the family that we want to keep aware of it. So this is where we call it a familial cancer. This could be due to shared lifestyle factors. So it could be like my mom and all her siblings who, went every summer to, sunbathe with, oil, baby oil and stuff. If they all start getting skin cancer, that's probably a shared lifestyle factor, right? Or maybe there's some kind of environmental exposure. Maybe you live downwind of a nuclear plant or there's something in the water, things like that. The stories that we hear about where there's like these pockets of cancer, those are going to be familial factors where there's just something that the family is sharing that's increasing that risk. Sometimes it can be genetic, but it's not a big enough genetic factor where we could call it hereditary, where we could do genetic testing for it. So familial is still, we're trying to tease out exactly what's causing it, but we do know that it's just happening more often in the family and people just need to be a little bit more aware, but the risks are not going to be as high as if it was hereditary. And then we have sporadic cancers, and sporadic cancers are cancers that just randomly happen. So they're not usually going to repeat in the family. They're usually a one-time thing. This is going to be where things like environment, lifestyle factors, our exposures, things like that can cause those cancers to happen. But there's also a chance that it could be due to just random bad luck chance where something went screwy with one of our cells and it started turning into a tumor cell. And so sporadic cancers don't increase our risk for cancer, don't increase our family members' risks for cancer. So as a genetic counselor, it's my job to kind of look at a patient's family history, their personal health history, and help them figure out where they fall in this chart. Are we suspicious it's hereditary? Do we think it's sporadic? Because that can impact how we manage them going forward and how we manage their family members. So these are some clues that we use to kind of figure out if something's hereditary or if it's sporadic or familial. So the column on the right is for hereditary melanoma. I put the column on the left on there just because I think it's important to know. We're talking a lot about melanoma, but as we dig into our family histories, we might start finding other cancers. So I thought it was important to also highlight that there are other types of cancer that can be hereditary as well. And they have very similar clues, but they're different in a little bit of ways too, and we'll kind of highlight those. So things to be looking for in the family history and things that we look for, our doctors look for. We look for early age of diagnosis. So these are typically melanomas that happen under age 50. So typically a cancer that's due to outside factors or due to sporadic means, it's going to take time for those factors to build up, those risk factors to accumulate before a cancer happens. Whereas if we have a cancer at an early age, was there like a genetic factor that got that process started a little bit faster? So age is usually a really big clue for us on like what we think the likelihood is for developing a hereditary cancer. We also look at how often it happens in the family. So, are we seeing melanoma in 3 or more relatives? And this can include yourself. So, it doesn't have to be like 3 people, not counting yourself, and then it would be a total of 4, right? It's just 3 in the family. These do need to be on the same side of the family. So if you have melanoma and then your dad's sister had melanoma and then your mom's grandma had melanoma, well, those don't count, right? Because in most cases, dad's sister and mom's mom are not genetically related to each other, right? Sometimes they are. We can see that people are related, and that's fine. We deal with that too, but typically they're not going to be related, so they don't usually count. So we look for 3 melanomas in the family that are all on the same side of the family. We'll look for multiple new primary cancers or melanomas. So this would be maybe somebody who's been diagnosed with melanoma twice, and this is not a recurrence of a prior melanoma. This is going to be a completely separate melanoma, usually in like a different area. We'll also look for rare locations of those melanomas. So we'll look for ocular melanoma. We'll look for melanoma on the bottom of our foot, vaginal or anal melanomas. So like places that we don't expect to see sun exposure, right? Bottom of the foot, sometimes get some sun if we're like tanning on our stomachs, but typically we don't get a lot of sun there. So places that don't see a lot of sun exposure, it's hard to blame, sun as a cause for that cancer. And so they tend to have a higher likelihood of being genetic. And then we know that the genes that predispose to hereditary melanoma can also predispose to other types of cancer. So we're not looking just at a family history of melanoma, we're looking for family histories of pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, kidney cancer. Those are some of the really common ones, but there are also other types of cancer that we can see tied with those genes. So as a patient, we don't expect you guys to like know and be able to identify like, aha, I have a hereditary melanoma, right? If you are suspicious of it or you're like, hey, some of this sounds like, something that applies to me or my family, we'll talk about how we can get access to genetic counselors towards the end. But know that like it's not your job to remember, oh, wait, Jennifer said that, melanoma is tied to pancreatic cancer, or did she say melanoma is tied to prostate cancer? I can't remember. They both start with a P, right? That's not your job. The associated cancers part, that is very specific to specific genes. It takes a little bit more of a trained eye to find those. Your job is to make sure that you bring an accurate family history to your providers, and your provider should be able to determine if they if you need a genetic referral or not. But those are just some things for you to keep in mind. So genetic testing for melanoma, we usually say it's best to start with the person who's had melanoma. That doesn't mean we won't test people who haven't. So if you are unaffected and have a family history of melanoma, you are still more than welcome to get genetic testing, but we get the most information from people who have already had melanoma. So people who, I had a supervisor who would say, if I have a apple tree and all the apples are red, but one apple is yellow, if I want to find out why that one apple is yellow, I'm not going to test a red apple, right? I want to test the yellow apple. The yellow apple is going to tell me what's going on. And so the same thing is true with genetics. If somebody in the family is going to have a mutation that's increasing that risk for cancer, it's the person who's had cancer, right? Whereas if we test somebody who hasn't had cancer and their results come back normal, Well, that's great for them, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the family doesn't have some kind of genetic risk. So it's best to start with somebody who's had melanoma, but we know that that's not always the case. Sometimes those individuals have unfortunately passed away. They're not interested in testing. They're not anywhere that's close to a genetic counselor or a way to get testing. So we are happy to test anyone who's interested in genetics, but we get the most answers from somebody who's had melanoma. Um, Typically, this genetic testing is done through panels. So panels are where we can look at multiple genes all at once. So it used to be we would do like a test for one gene and that was it, but now we can test for a lot. My minimum is usually about 47 different genes. And panels usually will cover, if we want to test for hereditary melanoma, it'll also usually cover a lot of other genes as well. So like breast or colon or pancreatic or uterine or ovarian genes. So usually it'll cover a lot of different types of cancer. And that just gives us a really good complete look at all the genes that we know of that could be predisposing to a specific cancer. And the real benefit of it is it gives us a better idea of how to clarify our risk for a future cancer. So it gives us an idea of, if I'm at a higher risk for cancer in the future, could I be at risk for kidney cancer, after my melanoma is complete? Could I, be at risk for a different melanoma? Could my family members be at risk? Do I need to do any kind of additional screening? So if I am at a higher risk for breast cancer due to my genetics, do I need to do more frequent breast cancer screening? Do I need to have more frequent dermatologic exams? Do I need to start kidney ultrasounds? What can we do to help prevent those cancers in the future? And every gene that we test for, those 47 genes, every single gene has different cancers tied to it, has different recommendations for them. And that's what a genetic counselor will walk you through, is kind of what that specifically means for you. Most testing is covered by insurance, and if it's not covered, there are affordable out-of-pocket test options. Most genetic testing labs will have a $250 out-of-pocket policy, which is still a lot of money. Right? $250 is not like something, to just say, oh, whatever, that's fine, but it's not as expensive as it used to be. And so it's become a something that a lot of people can say, well, I don't necessarily meet criteria, or maybe I don't have all those clues that were mentioned in that previous slide. But if you're interested or concerned and you are like, hey, I have $250, maybe this is an answer I want, we can absolutely still do genetic testing for you. There used to be a fear of discrimination as far as like health insurance discrimination based on genetic test results. So I always like to let people know that there's some great resources out there about a federal law called GINA. She stands for the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And GINA prohibits health insurance from discriminating based on genetic test results. She's passed in 2008, has had bipartisan support. She's a really great law. So, I encourage you to look. There's lots of really good information on her. And I also like to highlight that genetic testing is not for everyone. This is information that can provoke anxiety, right? Like some people have explained that this could seem like a ticking time bomb. Am I just waiting for cancer to happen? And so there are some people who don't want this information, and that is completely fine. So if you're looking at this and saying, oh gosh, this is giving me lots of anxiety thinking about this, it's totally fine. You do not have to pursue genetic testing. But some people have also explained that it feels like they feel like they've got some power from this. They can kind of take control over something that's otherwise uncontrollable. And it kind of gives them a little bit of a guide on how to proceed in the future. But everyone looks at genetic testing differently. And so if you're looking at this saying, not for me, that's totally fine. So if you want any more information on genetics and genetic testing, genetic counselors are really the best way to access genetic testing. We are certified and specialize in providing genetic testing and interpreting family history and genetic test results in view of that family history. So what a genetic counseling appointment will consist of is we typically build or analyze a family history and like a family tree, and we'll get pretty detailed. So we'll ask you some questions about lots of family members. We'll usually give you a personalized risk assessment. So do we think it's hereditary? Do we not? How likely do we think it's hereditary? Are there specific genes that we're leaning towards? We'll provide education on hereditary cancer. So this was a really brief overview of the stuff. Usually I'll talk to my patients for about an hour about like genetics and like how the mutations work and what they do and how these can increase our risk for cancer and more specifics on how they change our management. So we'll do that in a session. We'll usually help coordinate and interpret those genetic test results. We'll be the ones to disclose those results to patients and kind of give them the recommendations that they need. Even if results come back negative, we may still make screening recommendations because of that familial category. So it's just a really good way to kind of get an idea of what family members need to do. So if you're interested, if you live in Arizona, we're more than happy to see you here. And so our number is 480-256-GENE. Or if you are out of state, the National Society of Genetic Counselors has a really great tool on their website, which is www.nsgc.org. And they have a bar, tool there that says find a genetic counselor. And you put in your zip code, you say that you want it to be a cancer genetic counselor. Genetic counselors work in a whole bunch of fields, but you want cancer for this instance, and they will find genetic counselors in your area and have contact information on how to schedule with them. So great ways to find access to us. And one thing that I wanted to highlight before we jump to questions is, Dr. Mahmood was talking about the BRAF gene. I do want to specify that BRAF, if you had, a test where your melanoma was found to have a BRAF mutation, that's isolated just to the tumor itself. That does not mean that that's the same type of testing that I do, where it's genetic, it's getting passed on in the family. So if you had a BRAF mutation found on your tumor, it's not hereditary. It's not anything that you need to be worried or concerned about. BRAF mutations are not something that we see in a germline setting. I don't even test for BRAF mutations in my hereditary cancer patients. There's been some ties with BRAF and something called Noonan syndrome, which is a syndrome that causes early developmental delays in kids, but nothing that's associated with melanoma. So nothing that we're concerned about as far as a genetic predisposition.
Yeah, really, really appreciate that, Jennifer. I just want to touch on one point. If we think about why skin cancer typically shows up, it's mostly environmental and it's not genetic. And it's essentially because of the ultraviolet radiation you receive from the sun early on in life. And your skin cells get pounded with the ultraviolet radiation from the sun. And that's when those mutations start to take place. So you're not born with those mutations. They just develop in your skin and in your tumors. We're not looking so much at passing melanoma from one to the next, although, as she said, she went over all the genetics of that and really appreciate her insight. And what's great with our genetic counselors is they also attend our tumor boards, as I told you earlier. So they'll sometimes say, hey, that's a good patient that I need to see. They've had 1 or 2 or 3 cancers or in this scenario. So they're very proactive in identifying patients as well.